I'm GM Blue, a challenger player, and this video is part of a series where I talk about different set 9 comps each and every day. Subscribe if you like this sort of content. Now, Sorcs is one of the better comps at using +1s, in my opinion. So if you get a portal that gives a Tactician's Crown, or a portal that gives a Spatula, or a portal like God's Willow's Grove that allows you to contribute the traits from a unit on your bench, I think Sorcs is one of the better comps for abusing those different portals because it makes good use of Sorcerer +1, and it also makes good of adding different units to your board to provide valuable traits. The core 6 units that you're going to play are these 4 frontliners, which is Shen, Swain, Tarek, and Jarvan, and then you add Lux plus some other 4th sorcerer. In the mid to early late game, that's usually going to be Vel'Koz until you find Ahri. One note I will make is that I think Ahri 1 is better than Vel'Koz 2, so the moment you find Ahri, generally you're going to be playing that Ahri on your board. Now, in terms of itemization, you want to have 2 AP items on the Lux. I will note that I think Gunblade is very good. And then your third item is just going to be the Radiant from Demacia most of the time. Remaining AP items go into Ahri or Vel'Koz. And tank items go into Shen, Swain, or Jarvan, depending on which one you 2-star first, which is usually going to be Swain. In terms of Shred, which you almost always want to play, Shiv and Ionic are both good, but one note I will make is that there's a lot of upfront damage in this comp, so it is possible that Ionic is better than Shiv for this particular comp. In terms of your +1s, you can go more vertical into the trait and add different sorcs to your board. You can splash Frejlord, which is particularly useful if you do not have Shred from Ionic or Shiv. And one caveat about adding Frejlord to your board is you really do not want to have this Ash unit on your board ever. But let's say you get a Tactician's Crown and you don't have a lot of gold, or you have God's Willow's Grove, perfectly fine to use Ash in those cases until you're able to eventually replace her. And then you can also add a number of different Invoker units. So you have Galio, Soraka, Karma, and Rise. One note about each of these different Invokers is that they add their origin trait as well. So Galio provides Demacia, Soraka provides Targon, and Karma provides Ionia, which is the weakest of the 3, but there are some cases where you might value that. And then you also want to look into adding Demacia units to your board. We already talked about Galio, and Sona is another really good candidate for providing that Demacia trait as well. And then, like with most comps, you can add 5 costs to fill out the rest of your comp. So you can play Heimer, K'Sante, Sion, Senna, and then Aatrox and Bel'Veth can work as well if you get some random AD items in the late game. So this is the core idea behind the comp. You're going to play these 6 units on the right, and then you're going to add some combination of these units on the left to fill out the rest of your comp. Let me provide some examples to make this more clear. This is your standard level 8 board that you're going to play most of the time because it provides a lot of valuable synergies and it's relatively affordable. As you can see, there's several 2 costs, several 3 costs. You're not relying on hitting Ahri, and in general, this board is very hittable on 8. So this is probably what you're going to play a lot of times in stage 4 and 5, and it might even be what you end the game on in some cases. So the main thing of note here is that one of the 2 units that you're almost always going to add to your board is going to be a Demacian unit, which is almost always going to be either Sona or Galio. If you add Galio to your board, then the Soraka becomes somewhat redundant unless you have a +1 Invoker, in which case you can just sort of add just a high-quality unit. Rise is an example of something you could add. Heimer could be good, and just in general, any of the +1s I talked about before. But most of the time, I favor playing Sona, because I think she's just a higher or a better unit than Galio, and it does let you add some of these different Invokers to your comp. As I mentioned before, the moment you find a single Ahri, you're going to want to replace that Vel'Koz, because I think Ahri 1 is better than Vel'Koz 2, although again, that might change in the future. And then in terms of if you get a Sorcerer spat, the core of the comp changes a little bit, where you're going to drop the Soraka, and you're going to play Vel'Koz in order to fit those 6 Sorcs. You're almost always going to want to play 3 Demacia, so if you do get that Sorc spat, your +1 is usually going to be either Sona or Galio. And Invoker is obviously better than Multicaster. However, Sona is just a better unit than Galio, so again, I still usually favor playing Sona over that Galio in most cases. I generally do not recommend going and trying to play 8 Sorcs, because you would have to drop both Jarvan and Sona, and your board would look something like this, which, as you can imagine, you're losing a lot of front line here. It becomes unbalanced where you have 3 units in the front line and 5 units in the back line. You're losing Demacia on your Lux, which means you're going to lose some damage on your main carry. And you end up playing these really low quality units in order to get this trait. So I do not recommend going for 8 Sorcs unless you have, number 1, a Fawn, in which case you could play this board. If you have 2 Sorc Spats, you can drop the Orianna. Or if you have God's Willow's Grove, you can contribute Orianna from your bench, and that would give you 8 Sorcs as well. But those are really the only conditions under which I would play 8 Sorcs. Or if you're just level 9, you could play this board as well. Although later on at level 9, you're probably going to want to drop down into 6 Sorcs and just play higher quality units in these 2 slots instead. Some other things you can do is, instead of playing the Demacian unit as your +1, let's go ahead and drop this Sorc off the board, you could play Sejuani plus Lysandra. Now the issue with this is that you have a lot of frontline and you're losing out on a lot of damage because you no longer have Demacia for your Lux. But this might be a board you want to play if you have no sources of Shred, or if you just find, like, let's say a random Sejuani 2 during your roll down. This is something that can work in the late game as well. In terms of the early game here, the main thing of note is that your level 5 board, the ideal level 5 board, is going to be Kassadin, Swain, Taric, Vel'Koz, and Malzahar, and you're just going to play 3 Void, 4 Sorcs. In general, you're looking to pick up any Void units, so it doesn't have to be just Kassadin, Vel'Koz, and Malzahar. You can also pick up Rek'Sai and Cho'Gath as well. And you're looking to pick up any Sorc units. This is just the ideal level 5 board, and then you just start adding the best units you possibly can until you eventually get to level 7 and level 8. And that's it. I'll see you for the next comp discussion.